That's right guys, the next FNaF game has been announced. A couple days ago, Scholastic revealed that there would be an Into the Pit game coming soon. After a couple more questionable leaks, Scott actually spoke out on it. Since the game was supposedly coming soon, I assumed it would probably be a 10-year anniversary game, and I was right about that. Scott let us know that the game will in fact be a 10th anniversary game, and has also actually been in development for a really long time. Around the same time, a trailer for the game was leaked, and I was hesitant to watch it because it was a leak, but then I saw my friends openly discussing it without spoiler tags, and apparently a lot of people had watched it, and Doc also made a video on it and said that Scott knows it's already out there and wants to just embrace it, so I was like, might as well. The stuff in the trailer is really interesting though, and there's a few things I want to discuss regarding the game. There were a bunch of other images for the game outside of just the trailer that I think were leaked, but I'm only going to talk about a couple of them, and only at the end of the video so people can click off after I talk about the trailer if they want to. Surrounding the plot, it just follows the story of Into the Pit with a few added twists and changes. It's obviously slightly different, but that's because it's a game now, not a story. For those of you who don't remember the Into the Pit storyline, it follows a 10-year-old kid named Oswald who was really bored during his summer vacation, basically going to the library and Jeff's Pizza every day. One day, he decides to hide from his dad in the ball pit of Jeff's Pizza, which was strangely blocked off, and when he got up out of the ball pit, he found himself in the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, which had become Jeff's Pizza in the modern day. After going back to 1985 Freddy's a few times and hanging out with his new friends Chip and Mike, he finds himself lured by Spring Bonnie to the dead bodies of half a dozen dead kids. He escapes the pit and comes back to the real world and finds his dad, but then his dad gets pulled into the pit and replaced by Spring Bonnie, whom everyone sees as Oswald's dad, while Oswald and his cat are the only ones that see him as Spring Bonnie. Oswald ends up sneaking out of the house at night when Spring Bonnie is seemingly asleep and goes back to Jeff's Pizza. He finds his dad in the ball pit, has a trial by combat with Spring Bonnie, and then Spring Bonnie ends up getting caught in a net and dies, and then Oswald and his dad go home. That's the basic plot of the story. This game seems to be following the same storyline, but putting it into game form. At the beginning, we see the exterior of Jeff's Pizza, which looks really similar to the famous Chuck E. Cheese that people edited into Freddy's back in the days of FNaF 1 and 2, and the shape is also a bit similar to Freddy's from the FNaF movie, though it is a bit different. This design of Jeff's Pizza's exterior is also similar to how it is shown in the Into the Pit graphic novel. The graphic novel version is basically like this, except with much less detail, and I think it's easy to notice that there's a lot of detail in this game. We see Spring Bonnie luring Oswald at the beginning of the trailer, and you can see that he has blue eyes here, while you'd expect them to be red or yellow or purple or silver or green, but nope, they're blue. Oswald comes out of a vent, and in the background we can see a neon image of Bonnie similar to the ones we see in Security Breach, and we can see pictures on the wall of stuff like Freddy if he was LeBron James, as well as, strangely, what seems to be Toy Bonnie. Since this is the first Freddy's location, Toy Bonnie shouldn't exist at this point, so I do wonder why this is here. The paper pals can also be seen on the wall. Something else worth noting here is the design of Oswald. If you look at his outfit, you can see he's wearing a hoodie over a yellow striped shirt. In the graphic novel, he looks nothing like this, but in the original concept art for Into the Pit, this is how Oswald looked. His dad also much more matches his design from the concept art, as in this game he's much more on the heavier side, as he's described in the original book and how he's shown in the concept art, a detail that seemed to be ignored on the graphic novel. This seems to indicate that the concept art is much more reliable compared to the graphic novel, which should kind of be a given since the graphic novel artists are given creative freedom in terms of the actual art. Right after that part in the arcade, we find ourselves in a different room which looks to be a lobby or a break room or something. Honestly, there's like 3 different rooms in this trailer that look like a lobby, so I don't know. In this room, though, we see that there is an objective in the top right corner which says follow the creature, and there's also a heart monitor on the bottom right. I have an idea for what this could be, but we'll get into that a bit later. Another detail that's really interesting is that in Into the Pit, Oswald mentions how there's vague shapes on the walls that seem to be painted over, and later he finds out that those shapes were murals of the Freddy's characters which were painted over when this place became Jeff's Pizza. Interestingly, we can faintly see these painted over murals in the trailer in the background when we see the ball pit. Speaking of that part, this is when Oswald's dad is pulled into the pit and replaced by Spring Bonnie. But right before that happens, Oswald's dad says, "What were you thinking hiding in that nasty old thing? Didn't you hear me calling you?" Which is the exact same line he says in the original book. It's also worth mentioning that some parts of the game are actually in first person. Most of the gameplay seems to have a camera angle similar to the 2D Mario games, while some parts like jump scares and possibly cutscenes are 3D and first person, which is pretty cool. After that, we get a scene of Oswald running away from Spring Bonnie, which I think is actually meant to mislead us just a little bit, because after Spring Bonnie gets out of the pit in the original story, they go home, and that also of course happens in modern day in the real world, yet here we see them still in Freddy's and Oswald runs away. I'm thinking this is actually towards the end of the story where Oswald runs back to Freddy's and battles with Spring Bonnie. I'm guessing that the first 3/4 of the story will go by pretty quickly in the game, and that Oswald returning to Freddy's will be altered to become the majority of the game, going in and out of the ball pit to solve puzzles as the description for the game that people found indicates. That description is also interesting because it seems to say that the the game will be 5 nights, and I'm not so sure how exactly that would even work. I assume we'll have to solve puzzles while avoiding Spring Bonnie and the animatronics, which I'll get to in a bit. That description also puts to bed the idea that there are 6 dead kids in Into the Pit. Apparently half a dozen was more of just an approximation than a solid number, which I actually find pretty funny considering it caused a lot of debate. As Oswald is running away, we can see a poster in the background which very strangely shows Circus Baby. Since this is at the time of the missing children incident, this means that Elizabeth died before the missing children incident, which has some interesting implications. And before you guys come at me in the comments saying Circus Baby's opened after Freddy's closed, no. That was referring to Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, which is made evident by the fact that after that line, Hand Unit goes on to talk about the rental service itself. So yeah, Circus Baby's opened before Freddy's closed, and Elizabeth died before the missing kids. And based on information I recently discovered that I will discuss in a future video, I think we actually have Elizabeth's time of death completely narrowed down. So a couple minutes ago, I mentioned how we can see our heartbeat, but what is that all about? Well, when Oswald hides inside Golden Freddy, he is breathing heavily, which is what causes Spring Bonnie to hear him and kill him. Unless this is a scripted event, which it very well may be, it doesn't make sense that there would be a hiding place that kills us. Instead, it seems like something in the gameplay caused us to breathe heavily. I suspect that the heart rate will be something similar to the insanity from The Joy of Creation, where we have to take steps to ensure that our heart rate doesn't get too high, and if it does, our breathing makes a lot of noise, but if we keep it down, our breathing is much lighter, which allows us to be quieter. Just an idea though. So that's everything to do with the trailer, but now I'm going to talk about some of the images that have been going around. So if you don't want to see those images, you can click off now. I'll be honest, I don't really know where people found these images, but they are real. The first thing I want to mention is the Godzilla poster on the wall. The Into the Pit story mentioned a movie franchise called Zendrelix, which was very clearly a Godzilla ripoff, so it being here makes a lot of sense. There's also the drawings on the walls of the Freddy's characters which Oswald drew before he even got in the ball pit. What's more interesting is the stuff from throughout the series that appears in these images. In this one, for example, we can see the caterpillar and purple robot from FNaF 4, which is very interesting. This image seems to be of an alley or an outdoors area with a bunch of garbage, and some of this garbage is actually trash in the gang and what looks like Helpy. It's kind of weird that they're here, but it's pretty cool too. If you look on the door in the background, it's a bit hard to read, but it says danger, keep out. This image is actually causing a bit of debate because while the game clearly is a game recreation of Into the Pit, the story takes place over the summer break and ends right at the beginning of school, meaning late August or early September, depending on when school starts in the area that this game takes place. But this game has an October calendar with a date circled. This is weird because it's not the same time frame as the Into the Pit story. But funnily enough, in 2023, that date that is circled is actually October 27th, the day the FNaF movie came out. So who knows, maybe it's a reference to that, or maybe a coincidence. Either way though, it is a difference. Probably the most interesting images of all, though, are the ones that show the animatronics. Chica, Bonnie, and Freddy all appear in some of the images. Freddy stands in the dark and is for some reason missing an arm, with tools in the background that I suspect we need to grab. Chica is standing there looking glitchy, and there is what looks to be a power switch in the background, and Bonnie is under a table grabbing us. What seems to be happening here is that the animatronics get possessed after Oswald finds the dead kids, and so they start attacking. It's cool because although this is a warped memory and isn't technically literal, this is, from our perspective, the earliest part of the timeline where we see the animatronics attacking people. There's also an image of Spring Bonnie chasing Oswald with a mallet in his hand, and I'm guessing that we will have to travel between the 1985 memories and the present day to solve puzzles that will eventually lead us to beating Spring Bonnie somehow. I'm expecting that Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, and maybe Foxy will only be able to attack you in the 1985 Freddys, while Spring Bonnie can follow you to either. It could be kind of like how in Resident Evil 2, for those of you who have played it or watched my streams where I played it, the main hall is like your safe area. Outside of one exception, the zombies can't get into the main hall. They're like the animatronics, they can't get into the safe zone. But one character can get into the safe zone. In Resident Evil 2, it's Mr. X, while in Into the Pit, it's Spring Bonnie. But there's just one more thing I want to talk about. This isn't really an expectation, just a possible idea, but what if there's more to this game than is being let on? We know the game is based on Into the Pit, but we learn in the later Frights epilogues that the ball pit is not time travel, instead just storing the memories of victims of Eleanor or people tied to Eleanor. When Oswald gets in the pit, he just experiences one of the memories, the memory of the missing children incident. But since this is a 10th anniversary game, this would be the perfect opportunity to not only adapt Into the Pit, but also to span the series. If this ball pit contains memories from throughout the series, it could show us more stuff than just the missing children incident. I did a video talking about how I think a carnival was the beginning of the timeline, but it also seems to be being built up to. But a game based on the carnival wouldn't really work that well because there doesn't seem to be any animatronics or anything at that time that would attack us. But if this game explores memories, the ball pit could bring us to the carnival to see it for the very first time, showing off some lore and actually having something to attack us with Spring Bonnie following close behind. But that's everything I wanted to talk about for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and let me know in the comments what you think about the Into the Pit game. Let me know if you agree with my theories, and if you would also like to see the carnival in the game. I kind of doubt it will appear, especially since I'm not sure that the ball pit would even exist back then, or if it would be able to go back to a time period before it did exist, but it is a possibility, and I think it's a pretty good opportunity. I wouldn't be disappointed if it didn't appear, but I also would find it really cool if it did. But anyways, that's all, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, guys!